Welcome, citizens of the globe, to the Frontend Heroes podcast, where we discuss all things villainous and heroic about the front end of software development. My name is Evan Payne, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Scott Francis. How you doing, Scott?
Really well, thanks, Evan. Glad to be back on the show. Counting down the days to holiday, but looking to finish the year off with a nice podcast today.
Brilliant, yeah. There's not that many days left. By the time this comes out as well, there'll be even fewer left in this roller coaster of a year. It's a good day. Today's episode is sponsored by NetCentric, an award-winning Adobe Global Alliance partner. Both Scott and I work here as senior front-end software engineers, and we're glad, as always, to have their support with this show. Today, we have a special guest. You might have heard us introduce him on a previous episode as a true front-end hero for his work in the areas of performance. Fabian, will you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, it's nice to be on your podcast. My name is Fabian. I'm also working for NetCentric, and I'm created a web performance community. And since this year, I can focus all of my work on web performance, and I'm quite happy about it. So I started also as a front-end developer, doing this for 15 years, but now focusing a little more on the UX part of web performance. And that's what I'm doing.
Great. Thanks. Today's show title is Great Responsibility. And it comes from, of course, our show's closing tagline, with great front-end power comes great responsibility, originally from Spider-Man, and I'm sure other things before then as well. And really, we just want to talk about, we're building our front ends. How do we make sure that the greatest number of our users can actually use them in the end? This goes into a lot of different areas, but I think we should start with how we even define a baseline for ourselves to move forward with. So, Fabian, maybe you can talk a bit about this recent, I say recent, but it was in April already, initiative by Google, the Core Web Vitals, and what that means, and how you even, what's the value that's coming from that redefinition?
Yeah, so it's always hard to measure UX or web performance. So to have this one number which really tells you how good the web performance is. And what Google came up with this year was marketing calling Core Web Vitals. So they're talking about three metrics they use for this. And this is focusing on the largest element, so the time when this is rendered, because they think this is relevant and this is describing a little bit the loading time. Then they also have cumulative layout shift. So this describes a little bit how stable the layout is when things are loading. And a third metric is first input delay, which describes how fast the browser can respond to user action. So, and for these three metrics, they have a threshold where they say this you have to reach for 75% of your users, and then they consider this as good. And this becomes quite relevant because they also announced that they will use it as a search engine ranking factor starting next May, so May 2021. And therefore, it's a good metric which is easy enough to explain it to your clients. And as it comes from Google, they also believe this is a good idea to measure this. And you also get the benefits of SEO, which is relevant for most of our customers. Yeah.
Yeah, that's always my first thought when these sort of things are coming out is, like with AMP in the old days, I could see somewhat the benefit to that of focusing on these super fast to load pages for the end users. But then it got a little fuzzy in the middle of, if you're not in that program or don't want to, you don't get the search results you want. This seems to be much more genuinely focused on the end user and less about marketing, perhaps. Do you think that's the case?
Yeah, so I guess Google is really wants to benefit the users here, and And also, if you see what they're doing for the developer community and how they drive these topics, and they even turn down money for advertisement if your page is too slow. So all these factors really show, I guess, that Google really, want to benefit the user here. So this is, for me at least, believable.
Scott, what's been your opinion? I know you were excited about this when it came out as well.
Yeah, well, I think that the main benefit for this, and I don't know, Fabian, maybe you'd have more experience of this for me, is when you start talking about performance with clients, there's if there's not too much, if there's not a good history between you and the client, and I don't mean in like terms that a relationship's broken down. It's just if you've been involved with a client but for a short period of time, talking about things like performance can sometimes feel like, oh, well, we're just trying to tack something on to a project, and in the worst cases, the worst like suspicions, like extract more money from a client. It's like a hidden thing. So the thing that really I like about this is that it gives a real kind of official feel to what we're actually trying to do. Because at the end of the day, as developers, we are trying to produce something which is the best experience for our end users. The focus is always on that. And I feel that that's the real key for me with this. A well-established, like a giant of the internet has said, no, to actually give your user that experience that you're looking for, these are things that are going to provide that. And this is what you should be focusing on. And I think that for me, that gives just the extra push towards selling this to clients as something that's truly important. I mean, I guess you talk with clients more about this, Fabian. So is that something that you've found?
Yeah, definitely. So this is, this helps a lot in the daily life of explaining things to clients. Yeah.
Yeah, to me, it feels like, and I have used this in a project, that it's just a real clear way of giving focus. Because with developers, we've quite often known these things. I mean, another question for Fabian in a minute is like, before Core Web Vitals came along, are these the things that you were kind of measuring anyway? Is this just something that's like put some clarity to it, some order to what you were tracking anyway? But I think that it's just the real focus and making things simpler for clients, like actually just giving real focus instead of showing them waterfall charts and saying, oh, this is where things are going wrong, we need to speed this up here. It's just a real nice, succinct way of putting something to decision makers at clients. And for me, that's the real thing that you need. You need a dashboard, you need something that people can focus on numbers and are we hitting them? And it actually, for me, it gives license for developers to say, okay, so we have a target, we have the figure, now let's get creative. Let's find how we can make these things happen. So I think it opens up more possibilities for devs as well.
Yeah, I really appreciate as well how they've broken it down. So looking at, even if you go to web.dev, that's where they sort of have all of these things that they're pushing forward. And then the web.dev/vitals, really simple already to get to. And then they break it down into the 3 things that they're measuring, at least in this initial set. So one, I really like that this is going to evolve over time, that they're open to the idea that, yeah, things change. They change fast on the web. The way that things happen work. I mean, we didn't have HTTP2 ages ago, and now we do, and that changes how you load things anyway. And then breaking it down into these 3 sections, the first one being focused on loading, like not just how quickly does it load, but the biggest thing that has to load on your page, how quickly does that load? Because that is a big chunk potentially that it needs to paint. And if there's stuff there, you want to make sure it's there faster. Then there's the interactivity part. So how long does it take before your site, the user can actually like start to scroll or move around or click? And then the final one, which I think we've completely ignored in previous years because we're so focused on, just file sizes, is this visual stability, this cumulative layout shift, as they call it. So as things are loading, how much are they moving around? Is animation moving them into place, or are you accidentally, like, how much control do you have over how the page is being put into place and built as it's loading? For me, those are really interesting metrics. And again, what I like is not just the simplicity of the explanations there, but that they are taking a step further than what we've ever measured in the past. In the past, we said, how big is this CSS file? How much is above the fold? Those things, while still important, are sort of built into how at least these initial web vitals are being measured. Those are there too, but they're more specific.
Yeah, one big change probably we should also talk about is moving away from the measurement tools from having synthetic tests, because before often Lighthouse score was the way you measured things. This is also from Google and quite common with all our clients. But what you do here is you simulate like an older device and a slow internet connection. And so this is not real users. And with the core web vitals are now a real RAM metric, we call it, so real user monitoring. So this means this is collected from real users, and therefore it's also much more interesting because this is actually what was measured on the device, on the user. And so this is not just synthetic lab data anymore. So this is also a huge shift because before it was also hard because most of our clients don't really measure the web performance for the user. They're measured or they use synthetic tools to measure what, and this is not the same.
How are you actually doing in terms of actual implementation, how are you doing the measuring?
So there is a library from Google, so Web Vitals, it's on GitHub, so it's open source. You can install to your site, and they have connectors for Google Analytics, but you could also probably send it to other analytics software. So this is convenient, but because most of the clients already have this running. And this is one thing. You can have it also in the Google Search Console. So they are also checking the Web Vitals for you. But there, at the moment, for one client, I have an issue because if I run it on the page directly, I get good values, and in the Chrome console, Search Console, it's not updating. I don't know why. And then you also get it if you run PageSpeed Insights. You can get it. So they show you lab and synthetic data on one page. This is quite interesting because there you see how big the difference between them is. So often the lab data are much worse than what you see in real life, because often as web performance specialists, we usually test on a fast 3G connection, and most of the people have a faster connection. So that's also quite interesting. And it's not always easy to explain this to the clients too. And there are a lot of other tools. So we, for example, use Speakoff in our company, but also Impulse and Catchpoint. So there are a lot of other tools, and they all jumped on this and measure the metrics with RAM data if you buy the package. But those tools can be quite expensive.
I think that was really interesting, though, that just how serious the performance community really took Core Web Vitals when it came out. I mean, the take up immediately for things like Speed Curve, it was integrated very, very quickly. So it just gave another indication that this is something that was going to be here to stay, and something that we should really pay attention to.
Yeah, my next question would really be, okay, you've done these measurements, you've gotten some good insights. What are the sorts of things that you end up needing to change to make your results better? Have either of you had any experience with that in particular? Of, okay, well, I'm not doing well on this cumulative layout shift score, and now I need to set widths and heights on my images, so they at least pre-render. Anything like that?
Yeah, so I do a lot of audits these days, and definitely the cumulative layout shift in our projects, at least, are the worst problematic, because this is also quite a new topic, because there was no measurement before for this, so this wasn't really a priority for developers to really check this. And also, developers usually have a very fast internet connection, so often you don't really see this effect if you have the newest Mac and super fast internet. So therefore, but unfortunately, or fortunately, it's easy to fix. So most of the issues we have with images which have no width and height, and yeah, so this is something we fix at the moment. I also see a little bit issues with web fonts. So if you use font display swap and you switch the fonts and the fallback font and the web font are not similar enough, then you probably get also different line breaks, and this could also have an impact. But usually this is not a super big impact. So for our project, at least, we don't use advertisement a lot or anything. So this could be also an issue, but yeah, I don't have this often.
For me recently, sorry, Fabian.
No, go ahead.
For me recently, looking at performance, it didn't so much have cumulative layout shift problems. One thing that we did do, which we weren't doing, was preload the banner images, which did improve things. It was a nice little improvement and very easy to do. But I don't know whether it's just purely as a user of some terrible sites. Cumulative layout shift for me was like a huge problem. I would really honestly find myself navigating to sites that I had no desire to go to just because I'd pushed an advert whilst I was trying to read an article. Like I'd read an article on football, for instance, and then the page would suddenly shift, and the next thing I know, I've clicked on something and I'm miles away. And it was genuinely, as a user, it was really, I was really sick of it. And there was some development that we did with a client not too long before Web Vitals came out, where we were basically loading in a third-party widget. And the first thing that I thought was, I can't have this so that it moves the whole page. So I actually fixed that before it became a metric. But that was really, that was just chance. That was just because my own user experience of other sites was, oh my God, this is so annoying when everything just moves. We can't let this happen. So I'm giving myself a little bit of a pat on the back there, which occasionally I don't mind. But I mean, that again, points to what a useful metric it is. I know firsthand, just as a user, not as a developer, that this is so infuriating when it does happen. So it's really worth paying attention to.
Well, in fairness, it is a relatively new thing. As the ad networks have grown and people rely on advertising revenue to run their what are pretty much free sites, then they've had to add more and more interstitials and all these things. And those have gotten larger because, the ad networks don't always care. And so they're not pre-rendered. They load after the page loads, and then you have all this other stuff that happens. It's unfortunate that it's happened that way, but it can be really annoying. So it's nice that even someone that is as ad focused as Google is noticing that that's a problem and trying to find a solution for it. My own experience has been with actually the middle of the three, the first input delay. In particular, when you're using single page applications, there is a tendency to have this sort of, it needs to load the JavaScript, then bootstrap the app, and then figure out what route it's on. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that happens before it's actually able to be interacted with. And bringing that down has changed the way we're building our apps to begin with. You do a lot more trying to do server-side rendering now and get the application part of it to initialize after the initial content's already there. So at least they can start to read and there's buttons to click. And then the login and all that other stuff needs to be seamlessly just sort of popping into the background. It's hard. It changes the way you develop, but at the end of the day, it's better for the end user. They have a more seamless experience, right? And that's what this is all about.
Yeah. Yeah, the largest contentful paint is also quite tricky on a lot of, because our company is specializing on big brands which have usually marketing pages, and they really love their big stages with full-size images. And I even had a slider with 5 autoplay videos with one customer, or another used 2 megabytes animated GIFs, and and often this becomes then also a content issue. So there's technically only so much you can do. And it's therefore I switched also a little bit my role and to be earlier in the project. So already talk to in the design phase with people and raise their attention if I see, okay, we can't really fix this on the technical side. That's still a little bit the issue that web performance is by a lot of people still seen as a technical problem, which you probably might solve in the last sprint of the project, which is definitely not the case.
I guess I want to transition a little ways away from this, because this is a really good metric, but it comes at the tail end of a long amount of conversations and implementation practices around more or less the core topic of our show here, which is providing access to the most users possible. And, we talked about performance previously, and that matters a lot, but we also should talk about accessibility. And in particular, each of us can sort of share some of our experiences of how we've been faced with maybe repercussions for not giving attention to accessibility soon enough. I can start in a particular case I was working on. We just put off keyboard navigation until much later. But it turned out that one of the clients that we were building this for was a open employer. They had actually employees that could not operate the website that they needed to use with a mouse, and this was like an intranet kind of a thing. And it was called to attention that if we released this website without proper keyboard support, not only would they not be able to use this, but then they would be impaired from doing their actual job, which is one of the things we were building this site/app for. And then the client could get sued as a result. And, those are the sticks of it all, but it still just really called attention to, we do this as an afterthought sometimes, but it really can't be. There are so many people that for whatever reason don't use a mouse, and you need to have keyboard. And that's just scratching the surface of what accessibility is. Fabian, do you want to talk a bit about that? Because I know you've championed for this in the past as well.
Yes, I guess I really like both topics. But I'm a little bit more focused on web performance at this days. But I guess both topics quite similar, because it's a topic you have to address at the very beginning of the project. Because also, if you really want to take accessibility serious, you also have to test it with people who really know screen readers. And there's also a lot of things you have to do on the design side to make sure all the contrasts are good, that you don't rely only on color, and that also the spacing and the elements where you have to press buttons are big enough for people to get. And and then development is definitely also a part. Accessibility, it's often, if you have a lot of JavaScript functionality, then this can become quite tricky. But also the content at the end. And I guess with web performance it's the same story. So you have to talk to the same people about both topics. And if you keep this until the end of the project, this never really ends well, because it's much more expensive. So you have to do things from scratch, and also you need really a culture that people really test it, think about it, and in all the discussions, this is always a point you have to check, and that is still not the case there. And I have the feeling it's not because people don't want to do it. It's still the case that a lot of people just don't know about it.
I think it's kind of the easiest thing to overlook. And for me, there's personally, I just share my experience with accessibility. Probably like 12, 13, 14 years ago, even when I was working for another project. It was at local government level in the UK. And every bit of focus with this project was on accessibility. It was the key driver, because when you're using public money and there's legislation coming that the web has to be inclusive, then public institutions like local government, that's when they're going to be big drivers of this, because they're really fearful of that. They're always looking at like how they're spending the public's money. So that project for me was the key for my understanding of accessibility. We were audited heavily to make sure that the site was fully accessible to AA standard. We had to know all the rules, if you like, that led to AA, all the criteria. And if ever I needed like to think of how important it was, I was at a conference again, like 13 years ago, perhaps. And just for 20 minutes, one of the speakers was blind. And she just said, right, my talk is going to be going through a website on a mobile device. And let's just see how easy it is. And it was absolutely the most excruciating 20 minutes. Everybody in the room thought, like, we can't let this happen. This is awful. And so that really stuck with me. I think that since then, I've always been aware, but I also understand that for many clients and for many developers, it is something that can slip your mind, because it simply doesn't affect you. It doesn't present itself to you every day. Right? And I don't think there's malice with the way that people develop it. There's no malice I don't think there's with clients. They want to cut corners, and so they're prepared to cut accessibility. It's simply that it's out of sight, so it's out of mind.
Yeah, I had a similar conference talk experience with Leonie Watson, who is a very good advocate for doing things the right way and showing why it sucks when you don't, for different user sets. But moving a little bit beyond that, we forget, and these things kind of it's not right in front of us, so we put it off to the last minute. And to bring it back into performance as well, as Fabian, you said that you need to start at the beginning of these pipelines to explain to the designers even, or the UX part of the process, what is feasible versus not, or what is good for the end users versus not, or what is going to be impactful on performance versus not. And I feel like that is the hardest part of this, is to get everyone onto the same page. How do we approach that? I mean, I know we don't necessarily have full success, and yes, information is a big part of it. But how do we even begin to go from everyone is informed to we're still building really good things in a reasonable amount of time, but we also have this as the cornerstone of our building process, and this comes first. Performance and accessibility first, other stuff secondary. How do we switch the mindset there?
Yeah, so first, I guess you need to have a goal in the project. So it has to be defined and probably written down for everyone to see what's the priority of web performance and accessibility in the project. So this is often not done. And often in our projects, design is done by other companies, and they are probably hired by a different department from our customer, probably the marketing department, and we are coming through the IT department. And when we approach the project, often the design is ready, and there was no really discussion about it. So there were no front-end developers involved or experts in the topic. And this is a little bit the struggle we have. So if we start a new project from Eccentric, what I try to do internally, give a lot of internal talks, share knowledge, and so that people know, okay, these are topics we have to address. And the earliest people is probably account managers or project managers. They really have to know that these topics are relevant and that they bring in the right people at the very beginning of the project. And this is getting better. So a lot of colleagues are contacting me internally and asking for support here. But we are not doing a perfect job in every project here, definitely. And it's really hard. I guess nobody really is doing it.
Yeah, I remember as well in previous years, we've tried to ignore that or ignore those problems to a degree of saying, yeah, we'll do our best to start at the beginning and get them to do it there. But maybe we can raise the attention to this issue sooner if we integrate some sort of checks into even our build process. So, in the past we had sonar linting rules that when everything was building on the server, it would run through the HTML. That's not always possible anymore with the amount of templating we're doing, but to flag at least that things are being semantically built correctly, which is an important starting point. Have you run into any linting tools that help? I remember there was one that was like Narwhal from Microsoft, but has anything else come to mind for you? And is that a part of the process that we could tackle to maybe introduce awareness of performance and accessibility issues sooner?
Actually, I'm thinking about it at the moment for one client. So what is the best way if you have all the possibilities to measure web performance? And for me, the development part is probably the most or the hardest part, because to get realistic, so you need first content to really measure things. So if you build, for example, an image component, it makes a huge difference if the image you upload with it is 10 kilobytes or 1 megabyte. And therefore often, so it probably is different if you're working on a single page application, then you have probably the architecture has a huge part of it. But what I see also for my audit, so if you do a good job with web font loading, you have a good strategy taking care of your images, you have a good bundle JavaScript and CSS files. So what we try is to have best practice around those topics. And once they're in place, then you're on the technical side often already quite good. So if you're working on a component, you probably have to make sure that you don't introduce any layout shifts or that you don't add long running JavaScript tasks. But more than this is often then on the content side, which has a bigger influence on web performance.
Yeah, one of the things as well that I've been trying to push within my own teams and projects, and not always successfully, is, okay, let's put all these metrics aside. Put yourself into the mindset of a user and just, even if it's put it on a slower connection or put it on a mobile, load the site or load the app you're building. How does that feel to you? We get so caught up in the individual features we're building, sometimes we forget to take a step back and just feel the process. And when you do so, it's easy to spot things like cumulative layout shift because you didn't put a loader in place where you probably needed one. If it's too late to change some of these things you're doing, at least you can make it feel better. There's lots of different ways to approach that as well. It's not the perfect solution, but at the end of the day, your goal is to give the users a fluid feeling and a feeling of interest and attention and joy when they browse the things that you create. So there's other ways besides just the metrics ones as well. I don't know. It's not necessarily the best mindset to have, but it can make things better when it's maybe too late before the next release. Yeah, I don't know.
I guess the biggest issue is also that as developers, we have the latest hardware and good internet connection speed. And so for us, we don't really see often issues you would see if you would test it with €200 Android phone probably with a throttle network connection. If every developer would test their code under these conditions, you probably would. This would probably help more than using linters sometimes.
Yeah, but I think that maybe, I mean, you make a good point there. Like, we do all use the best hardware, but like developers are always going to do that. They're always going to try and to maximize their time. Like, really, we have testers who jump in and make sure that our features work correctly. The work that we've done works correctly. I mean, to me, the testers probably don't need those like super fast devices. What they actually need is to really look at them, really look at things as a user. I mean, I'm not advocating that that we should just develop whatever we want and then the testers tell us. We should take responsibility for the things that we build. And I think eventually clients will start just believing that as developers and as software houses, we should actually be delivering things that are accessible to all and are as performant as they can be. That I think they would just start thinking that as a standard. Like, it's not for us to just ignore those or kind of say, oh, well, there was no mention of it in the project planning, so we're not going to do that. But testers really, really need to chime in here. And make sure that they really champion the user as like the fail-safe. Then we could actually do something about that. I think developers' environments and their hardware is always going to be good. It's always going to be, because we want to develop with the fastest tools that we can. But testers perhaps don't need that.
There's a metaphor here, or anyway, it applies. An anecdote, which is, I saw it in a movie first. I saw it in the movie's name escapes me, but the really good one about Glenn Hansgard, or with Glenn Hansgard in it, about being a musician and in Dublin and things. Regardless, the musicians often, when they're recording a record or doing some sort of track or longer things, they will, before they're done doing the mix and all of the, finishing the audio track off and mastering it, they'll put it onto some sort of format, get out of the studio and go into someone's old car from the 80s and drive around listening to the thing that they made. And that's that kind of test of, you're not going to be with these €1,000 headphones in a enclosed studio booth listening to your music most of the time. If you're their average audience, you're going to be bumming around in your car with traffic noises all around you and kids screaming in the back. Listen to it in that context. Does it still feel good to you? And I think that really fits for people's websites as well. You know if it's hard to use. You do. And at the end of the day, you know if it is not fulfilling the web vitals. But take it out for a test drive yourself every now and then as someone that is not as privileged as you, and see how it works and fix it and make that your de facto and your default.
Yeah, isn't there is it like the New York Times or something? God, we're terrible for these little stories. Actually remembering the details. But there is some company where on Fridays they switch JavaScript off of browsers or something like that, and they have to use like their site without JavaScript just to see, like, just to highlight issues, like what's going wrong, what can we not use, what is, like, if this is gone, then how easy is it to actually accomplish anything? And I think that is, that's a similar thing. Just really getting yourself to see things through other people's eyes, and it is really valuable. Again, it's something that really needs to be put into the culture of a project or an organization, because that is exactly the sort of thing which would slip off the radar. It would be, the intention would be there, and maybe after a couple of weeks it would just drop off and suddenly it's not so focused. But the idea is solid. So I don't know. I think that embedding something like that in a culture would take time, but I think that it would add value.
Fabian, maybe some last words from you on what you're excited about for next year in this area, and what you're pushing for, to evolve this.
Yeah, at the moment, I guess together with Scott. So Scott was doing most of the development. We are working on a library we're calling Proc UX, so progressive user experience, and this is just a few lines of code, and where we try to understand what is the current internet connection, what is the browser device capable of. So do we have the newest iPhone, or is it a €200 Android device? Or we also try to get into account the user preferences. So, for example, if users want to save data and or don't want to be getting animations because they're getting sick of it. So this is a little combination of web performance and accessibility. And this is a tool developers can use to make decision and use progressive enhancement in their code, so that we don't, that we probably deliver the best experience for every user and not the same experience for every user. Because for half of our users, probably this experience wouldn't be the best they get. So, and we are building a demo page. We are testing a lot there. And we also want to come up with an open source RAM tool as well, so that you can really track also these people. And this is what we're currently working on. And next year, hopefully, we ship this out. So we plan to open source all of these tools, and probably we can have another talk then if everything is ready.
Yeah, absolutely. Really looking forward to that. Okay, thanks. So next up, we have our segment, True Heroes. In this segment, we want to highlight a few true front-end heroes working across the planet and thank them for all that they do. And this time, we all agreed that we should highlight one, Mr. Harry Roberts. Fabian?
Yeah, I can take it up. So I know Harry from conference talks. So first saw him on YouTube, and then also live on conference talks in Amsterdam on the WebPerf conference. And Harry is like an independent web performance consulting, and he is doing a lot of conference talks, also really good workshops. So we send a lot of our people to attend these workshops about web performance. And he's sharing a lot of very practical things. This is what I like the most about him. So there are others probably where you can learn more technical things, but he's very open how to deal with web performance in real life. And this at least helped me a lot also to get this implemented in our projects.
Yeah, I remember in particular when I was first getting really into coding, into building proper websites 6 years ago, or maybe even 7 at this stage. He had a site which is still out there called CSS Guidelines, so CSS guidelin.es, that just sort of walked you through, syntax and formatting and all of these things that it can seem so overwhelming. And there's so many ways to write code, and like, what is the proper way? How do you nest things when you're using Sass? And, how would you do things in BEM? All of these rules of stylistic choices, having someone that had those defined for me. And this is in the age before linters would yell at you if you weren't using the Airbnb ones. That really helped. And he continues to just push, as you say, these nice, simple solutions. So yeah, thanks, Harry. We appreciate all that you do. We'll see if we can get Scott back. But in the meantime, any proper hero is a well-rounded one. And so we want to share some simple musical picks today. So I guess we can start with you today, Fabian. What's the favorite thing you've been listening to lately?
At the moment, so I'm sitting in Munich, and we had the first snow yesterday. So it's getting really cold, and I enjoy the last week listening to Pauline and La Playa. So Spanish music. So this warms up a little bit here, the cold Munich.
Good. We'll check that out. Scott?
Yeah, I've been listening to a band called the Black Pumas. And like a friend put me onto these. Their album's the same name, I think. I think it's Black Pumas. If you like if you like sort of like Motown-y feel, like that kind of old style music, then I mean they're new, but their music is absolutely fantastic. I think it's a really great album. I'd definitely recommend checking that out.
Nice. Okay. And carrying on of what Spotify tells me was my most played album and artist of the year. It's this band called Tiasu, Tiasu. I don't really know much about them. There's no bio on there. And I don't always like all of their albums, actually. But this one in particular is just really good. If anything, it's chiptune, going back to my video game kind of music roots. The album is called W_Hole. So whole with the two spellings. It starts off without the W and ends up with the W. It's really good. It's really no vocals, just instrumental. I don't know. I've quite enjoyed it. It's good music to code to as well. Great. So those are some interesting choices to fill your ears with next time. Looks like that is all the time we have for today, folks. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed the show, you should like, heart, or star us in your podcatcher of choice. Reviews and ratings are how those fancy algorithms help people find our content. And the power to help is within you. If you have any questions or topics you want covered in our next episode, send a tweet to us at Heroes Frontend, and we will add it to our list. But until next time, heroes, remember, with great front-end power comes great responsibility. See you next time.